Lady Olivia of Swathout, you are now in the presence of the great Khan, Emperor of the known world. The Khan wishes to know of the customs of the peoples of the far west. I warn you to speak only truth, for there shall be an accounting. Now tell the Khan of the great hall which they call Weatherspoons.
My great Khan, I prostrate myself before you. I have traveled far and wide to experience the radiant beauty of your majesty's mighty kingdom, and though my humble homeland pales in comparison, I may tell thee of a majestic hall where beverages like nectar flow freely from all manner of taps.
How many beverages are available at this hall? Is it more than the Khan's great silver tree of Karakoram?
Aye, my lord. 'Tis 10 taps at most locations, though often as many as 14 during the seasonal ale festivals, not to mention the various bottles and sundry cans in the refrigerators.
Tell the Khan the cost of these ales. Is it prohibitive?
Nay, my lord. By being a large national franchise with many locations, the economies of scale enable beverages to be sold at reasonable prices.
And is there also food?
Yes, my lord.
And is it good?
No.
But do you eat it?
Aye, my lord. I partake every time I go. Under the ale spell, or perhaps the meads, or the beers, 'tis difficult to resist its call. Indeed, I have taken of many a greasy pizza, and indeed, countless burgers and wings innumerable, though, truth be told, I know not why, or how.
The great Khan is confused. If the food is, as you say, bad, but also high in calories, why do you go?
Well, my lord, 'tis more than a place to feed one's body or quench one's thirst. 'Tis a place to feed one's spirit and quench the thirst one feels in one's soul. 'Tis a place where philosophers gather and the nation's wisest men sit around to debate and to hatch scheming grand plans. Aye, 'tis even a place where the noblest podcasters meet each other to plot out the next pod they will cast.
The great Khan is pleased. Perhaps he shall visit one of these Weatherspoons when London is under his dominion.
The feast is o'er. Now brimming wine in lordly cup is seen to shine before each eager guest. And silence fills the crowded hall, as deep as when the herald's call thrills in the loyal breast.
Welcome back to the Weird Medieval Guys podcast. I'm Olivia, and this is Aaron, a guy with one leg and one big foot that he uses to shade himself like an umbrella.
I thought you were going to say a white boy who says Inshallah.
And he also says Inshallah. And today we are going to be talking all about travel and travel writing and how medieval people interfaced with the world around them when they left their home cultures and immersed themselves in worlds that were completely unlike those which they had grown up in. So we're going to be talking about, in particular, some specific cases of Europeans who left Europe to go to Asia and to the Levant, and we will also be talking a little bit about people from Asia and the Levant who went to Europe, but for reasons that will become clear, there will be a particular thread of medieval European travel writing throughout this episode, so it's going to be great seeing the big wide world through medieval eyes, and let's dive right in.
Yeah, spoiler alert, the reason for that is not that medieval Christians were more cosmopolitan and open-minded than the rest of the world.
No, and we spoke in the last episode about the Mongol Empire and about the type of cosmopolitanism and the types of cultural and, of course, economic exchange that facilitated. So I thought that would be a good place to jump off for this episode. Because, you've all heard medieval travel stories. You've all seen maps with sea monsters on them. So there's this idea maybe that we've got a little bit that like medieval people were completely overawed by the world outside Europe. Maybe they had like no idea what was out there and they really thought it was like real dragons and real monsters and real ogres all over the place. And that was certainly true for some people. And that very much shapes our image of medieval travel writing as being these like embellished accounts by people who probably didn't even go to Asia and or Africa, and even if they did, they were somehow having this experience that they could not like reconcile with their expectations and their exoticized views of the world outside Europe. So they just had to write down, and there was also a dragon.
Yes.
Even if they didn't see one. Like, that was what they had to do to make sense of the whole experience.
Yeah, we've talked about this several times before, but a lot of early medieval travel writing, with the asterisk that much of it will not have even been written by people who did any of this traveling. A lot of this is very formulaic. And it's a lot of the more fantastical elements in particular are repeating things from texts like The Life of Alexander that are sort of like canonical texts of like, well, it's expected that you should say this about a place.
Yes, exactly. There's a very well-established formula for what lies beyond Europe, and we've already talked in our Prester John episode.
Prester John is out there.
Prester John is out there, and also like India, Africa, Ethiopia, like it's basically all the same thing. It all like falls under the umbrella of India, which is just a catch-all for foreign, which is the place where guys with their faces on their chests and with one big foot live, as well as all the dragons, obviously.
And where they get pepper.
And that's where they get pepper from, but you have to...
fight a big ant.
You have to fight a big ant or a dragon.
It's very Gregor the Overlander.
Yes, exactly. But as much as we will get on to people who traveled because maybe they had some compulsion to see the world purely for its own sake, I think we should start by talking a little bit about people who had practical motivations for seeing the world. In particular, one very practical motivation, which was money.
Yes. I mean, we talked in the last episode about how, like, the Mongol Empire both was sustained by and encouraged international trade, and how that, like, again, I just like this analogy a lot, the capillary action of people moving about generates revenue for the Mongols, and so they want to encourage it as much as possible, make it as easy as possible to get from one end of the earth to the other.
Yes, it is almost like a big organism. You have these arteries and people flow through carrying their European goods all the way to China maybe, or to Constantinople, and they sell them for money and they bring back the money, and it's all just one big exchange. And so by the mid-14th century, the routes for doing this were very well established. The infrastructure was very well established for traveling eastwards from Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So much so, in fact, that we have guidebooks written for merchants telling them basically what to expect when you're embarking on your first journey to the East.
First, grow a beard.
Yes, that is one of them.
That's not a bit, that's one of the tips.
That's one of the tips, yeah. So in particular, I'll be referring to the Pratica della Mercatura by Francesco Balducci Pegolotti. Don't at me on my Italian accent.
Your Italian accent, I think it was okay.
Yeah, so this was written around 1340, so like right on the cusp of when things started to go really to shit for the Mongols, especially with the Black Death and everything. So sort of someone who's lived through the heights of this so-called Silk Road, in brackets or air quotes or whatever, because it was not one road. It was like just the state of being able to travel between Europe and Asia overland.
Well, there was like 3 roads. Well, really 2.5 roads. There was the one that went south via Persia. This was the widely regarded to be the worst one because it was most unpredictable, but it could also be the quickest. And there was a northern one that sort of ran through like Kazakhstan and the countries along that line. And then there was, if you were a real psycho, you could take the shortest road, which was the Siberian road, which went north.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, if you were trading in furs, that was absolutely like gold dust. But if you were literally anybody else, do not even approach the Siberian road.
And of course there were, intermediate routes, and there were like branches that went between these. So, it's a whole network.
And lots of people, I should say, it's important to remember, most of the people who used this trading network would not have traveled along the full route.
Yes.
Long distance international trade, even in the Mongol period, it is a mostly a period of people basically sort of selling it to the next guy along the chain, who will then either, depending on his business model, either sell it where he is or continue the exporting journey.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Pegolotti writes this book as a handbook for merchants, and this is not travel writing the way you might think of it. There's no guys with faces on their chests. He doesn't say, when you see the guy with the face on his chest, make sure you give him $2 to let us, so he'll let you through. This is a practical guide. It contains practical information. This guy was a Genoese merchant. He had traveled around a lot. And this was a book you were meant to hold in your hands while you were traveling as a resource. He assumes that you'll be starting in Tana, which is this Genoese trading colony near the eastern banks of the Sea of Azov. One of several such outposts around the Black Sea in the 14th century. One thing that Pegolotti really emphasizes in this narrative is that it's broadly safe. He says you're pretty much going to be safe when you do this. There's a few bits where he says, you'll want to travel in a group, but overall he makes it clear that you should not be afraid while doing this necessarily, provided you take the right steps. Mm-hmm. So one of the things he does is he gives you this really, really long list of exchange rates and units of currency and definitions and everything you might need sort of practical wise in to travel through Persia, to travel actually all over Europe. So he gives some for Britain and for the Low Countries and for Italy as well. But he also talks about Persian units and about the Mongol units of measurement and stuff as well. So, this is what currency they use. They sell, fabric in this length, which is equal to this equivalent length, which should be, these grades should cost you this number of Chinese coins, which is, this, where he actually talks about Chinese paper money, which should, translate to this amount of Florentine golden ducats. It's all very practical.
And by the way, the fact that he's able to do that is itself a reflection of how hard the Mongols had been working to standardize currency and standardize these kinds of measurements within their own empire, because they're very conscious of the fact that this is the sort of thing merchants need to know.
Yes, exactly. And he also gives you a little glossary of all these terms in languages like Tatar and Persian and Italian, where he says, this is how you say guards, help me, and this is how you say marketplace.
This is how you say after him.
Exactly. Assassin.
No, this is after the assassins.
This is after the assassins. And
Tragically.
This is, this is how you say 1 yard of brocade in Persian, and so on. So again, very practically oriented. And then he has sort of his list of advice and things to expect when you're traveling. And one of the big things that he emphasizes, in fact, the very first thing that he opens with, first is grow a beard, actually.
Yeah. You explain that.
I think it just makes you look like more of a hard man, basically.
Well, that, and also some of the explanations that I've seen is that it's it helps you blend in a community that's mostly Muslim.
Yeah, I think so.
Europeans were generally clean-shaven. In Islam, traditionally, you're sort of expected to grow a beard if you can.
Yes, basically. And, if you're a swarthy Italian, then, it just really takes the beard. So, yes, and he also says, right after grow a beard, he says, do not cheap out on a good interpreter. So he says, pick up a dragoman, which is a great word. It is the word that is borrowed, I think, from Turkish, maybe from Arabic, I think from Turkish. And it's the word for someone who translates between European languages and either Turkish or Turkic dialects or Persian or Arabic. So basically, someone you want on your side when you're traveling from Europe to Asia or the Levant.
A fixer. A guy who knows where everything is.
Yes, exactly. And And so he says, yeah, don't skimp on this. Don't get a cheap guy. You don't want to be like halfway through the Asian step and like find out you can't trust this guy. He's not telling you the right stuff. So make sure you pay enough to have a good interpreter. It will be worth it down the line. He says this, like, you will make your money back because he will be able to, like, you know, get you through. He will get you out of probably like unnecessary tariffs where people think they can take advantage of you because you're a rube. He is going to be like the linchpin in this operation. And so this is, you know, an important reason for why you're starting this theoretical journey in Tana, because this is a quite diverse trading post. It has a majority European Christian population, so majority like French and Italian, but there's a lot of Greeks from the Byzantine Empire. There are a lot of Armenians, a lot of Jews, a lot of Mongols and other Turkic people. And it probably is these people, Armenians in particular. I read a paper that focused on Armenians and their roles as translators living in Tana. So there were even Armenian families who made it their family business to be interpreters. And, you know, growing up in these sort of transcontinental areas, you would have just been exposed to, you know, the Tatar and Cuman, which is another Turkic language. There's probably a whole dialect continuum. You would have been exposed to like these languages and also Italian from a young age, and you'd be primed to be a good translator from one of these guys. So yeah, here's a little quote actually from this book. He says, "In the first place, you must let your beard grow long and not shave." Actually, do you want to read this in an Italian accent?
Okay, let me try. In the first place, you must let your beard grow long and not shave. And at Tana you should furnish yourself with a dragoman, and you must not try to save money in the manner of dragomen by taking a bad one instead of a good one, for the additional wages of the good one will not cost you so much as you will save by having him. And if the merchant likes to take a woman with him from Tana, he can do so. If he does not like to take one, there is no obligation. Only if he does take one, he will be kept much more comfortably than if he does not take one. Howbeit, if he do take one, it will well be that she be acquainted with the Comanian tongue as well as the man.
Yeah, so he's saying, well, yeah, first of all, get a good translator and grow out your beard. Second of all, like, you'll probably get a nicer room if you've got a woman with you. Which, you know, to be fair, astute advice. This is how you know this guy is locked in on, like, the practical details. But even the woman you bring with you to get, like, preferential treatment, like, she should also not be, like, a complete rube. She should know the local languages. Because clearly that's going to be something that makes quite a big difference in being able to find your way and keep yourself safe. So yeah, he says the road you travel from Tana to Cathay is perfectly safe. Cathay is China. Whether by day or by night, according to what the merchants say who have used it. Only if the merchant in going or coming should die upon the road, everything belonging to him will become the prerequisite of the lord of the country in which he dies.
That's the Khan.
That's the Khan, and the officers of the lord will take possession of all. And in the like manner if he die in Cathay. But if his brother be with him, or an intimate friend and comrade calling him brother, then to such a one will they surrender the property of the deceased, and so it will be rescued. So that's pretty law-abiding. That's pretty nice. And he says, so he says, the most dangerous part, he says, is the road from Tana to Sara, and even then he says, as long as you're in a group of 60 men, like, you'll be safe. So, you know, it's a pretty big party, but it's still, you know, he's saying you'll be pretty safe. And he talks about Chinese money and paper money, and he says, you know, you'll go there, you'll give them your gold coins, and they'll give you paper money. Don't freak out. It's still valuable.
It's still money.
Yeah, exactly. But the matter of language that he touches on is something that pops out as being a matter of particular importance, because even though he's giving you some, you know, words, some important words to know, it's very clear that you want to have a guy on your side who is fully aware of the local languages, the local culture, the local customs, because, you know, being able to say 1 yard of fabric is a little bit different to, like, knowing that someone is trying to impose an illegal, you know, tax duty on you, and being able to say, get out of town, man, I don't owe that. I know the tax on a yard of brocade silk is 1 florin per meter or whatever. So yeah, you want someone there who knows the lay of the land, so to speak.
You don't want to get very good price for you, my friend, kid. Basically.
No, exactly. I know. My parents had that happen to them when they were traveling through Eastern Turkey, and like they got sold this really bunk rug with like a bubble in the middle. Oh my god, it took them years. They were so hard done by. It was a really, really like otherwise really nice kilim. I feel like someone could have, because it's like one of those ones that has like a seam down the middle. It was woven in 2 parts. I feel like someone who knows their kilims could have taken it apart and maybe sorted it out, like, and re-sewed it, but I don't know. Bozeman, Montana. It's hard to find a good kilim guy. So yeah, this classic issue of like, don't let people take you for complete fools is something that comes up basically again and again in these practical medieval accounts of travel to foreign lands. So we have great sort of records from a Flemish Genoese guy about 50 years after Pegolotti, or 100 years after Pegolotti. His name is Anselmo Adorno, and he went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land and basically wrote about like all of his issues with trying to find a good interpreter. And he starts off his travel by saying, his travelogue, by talking about like all of these confusing circumstances they end up in before they find a translator. So he's like, and then we docked, but then like they told us we couldn't get off the boat, and we asked why, but no one understood anything. It's all very familiar.
Yeah.
And then they find a translator who is a Muslim guy from Seville, and he apparently just like scams them up and down. So a classic thing that comes up in these stories is like you give your translator or your dragoman some money to buy you provisions for like the next week, and he just goes and spends it on something else. Or like, you agree on a price and then he raises it. So there's a moment where Anselmo is talking about traveling through a desert with his guide, and when they're in the middle of the desert, the guide is like, oh, by the way, we agreed on this price. And Anselmo was like, no, it was less than that. It was half of that. And the guide is like, well, I don't think so. And if you don't want me to leave you here in the middle of the desert, then like, you better not disagree with me. So yeah, immensely stressful addition to what's probably already a pretty stressful trip, because we all get stressed out when we're traveling, right? On the other hand, later he meets this monk from Sinai, a Christian monk, and he has to pay this guy a little bit more, but he feels like he's gotten a really good service out of him, and the monk has again saved him from like some tolls that he shouldn't have had to pay. And basically, yeah, Anselmo concludes it's all worth it. Anselmo writes specifically that there's 3 skills that you need a good interpreter to have when you travel abroad. And really, you can extend this to 3 skills that you might need to have when you travel abroad, because not everyone has an interpreter. And we can only imagine that people like merchants, the more journeys they would have taken overseas, the more they would have become responsible for themselves, as they would have learned the local languages and customs more. So Anselmo Adorno says, a good interpreter has good language skills, of course. They're trustworthy. They're not going to leave you in the desert. And they're familiar with the local culture and the local customs. So they'll actually know like what they're doing, and they'll be able to liaise with the local people in a way that's helpful. And so, yeah, we see this over and over again, that this is how you stay within the established frameworks and routes for traveling safely in the Middle Ages. You basically just have to stick to these protocols, and you want someone who will just be able to tell you, like, now you need to go here. A little bit like a modern sort of package holiday. Like, you want to, and this was how a lot of people did pilgrimages. A lot of Europeans did pilgrimages. You would take a boat from Italy to the Holy Land. You would get off the boat, like, in a big group with a guide. You would not lose sight of the guide. You would spend, like, a few days or weeks seeing the sights, and then you get back on the boat. Home.
This is kind of how most Muslims do Hajj now.
Yeah,
it's a package. Like there are companies that will run your Hajj for you.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll give you an itinerary.
And I'm sure that was a thing for Hajj back then too.
Kings of Roland, there is his Gurland, who dies on the field.
So, yeah, we're still sort of like miles away from our stereotypical genre of medieval travel writing about monsters and sprites and pixies and, things things that go bump in the night. So there is like a real need for practical information about how to travel between the East and the West. Another group of people that would travel between the East and the West and also needed to actually have and provide real information about how to do so was missionaries. Mm-hmm. And we already talked in the last episode about how the Mongols were pretty accepting of missionaries.
Yeah.
It was like Shark Tank. They were like, hey, come on, give us your pitch.
Give us your pitch. We're in the market.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a Franciscan friar named William of Rubruck, who we have actually talked about a couple times. He was a Flemish guy who was sent by the Pope in the 13th century to preach among the Mongols. So he's sent to preach in the time of Mongol Khan, and he basically has like no end of trouble. So
he very clearly hates being there.
From start to finish, basically, he seems like utterly miserable in a way that's like quite funny, because it feels like it's like if he learned, he's there to spread his own culture and religion. So I suppose like he can't just like loosen up and drink some fermented mare's milk, but you really get the sense if he did, he would have actually maybe somewhat counterintuitively been more successful in getting them to accept Jesus.
Yes.
Because the Mongols clearly all think he's like a huge tight ass.
Well, they're a very huzzah culture, and what are the Flemish? They are the least huzzah society I've ever interacted with in my entire life.
Yeah. So, I mean, his troubles begin in Nakhchivan, which is, I think it's like Armenia or Georgia or Tajikistan or somewhere. It's the modern Central Asia, basically. So they hire this guide, and he's in a big party, and they all give this guide a bit of money, and the guide to buy them food for the journey ahead. The guide does not buy them any food. He pockets the money, and then as they're going on their journey, he will like intermittently leave the party to go and steal sheep from local farmers and kill them and like roast them. And William is so taken aback, he won't even eat the sheep. He's like, I could never eat the spoils of crime, which, fair enough. That's very noble.
Yeah. We
have no choice but to respect that. Folks, listen, I wouldn't have been so strong. I wonder whether he was. I wonder whether he maybe, do you think he partook?
I think he might have partook once or twice.
I think that's the thing, is when you're in the Central Asian steppe and they've got the sheep, crackling over the fire.
And you can smell it.
Mm-hmm. And you're like, actually, no, nothing for me. My faith sustains me. No, absolutely not. This guy has no force of will. I mean, let's carry on. So he also, again, like the issue with interpreters comes up, and like, I mean, they don't bring an interpreter with them that I can tell. There's a guy who they bring with them whose name is like, or who they meet at some point. His name is like Homo Deus. That's what he gives his name as. And
sorry, what did you say? Homer Simpson?
Homer Simpson. It's not really clear like who this guy is. I think he's a Muslim. They're struggling with him. Like William clearly doesn't think that he's that smart. But they also just like as soon as they get into Mongol territory, and this is really where the need for cultural sensitivity, intercultural communications comes through, because they talk to this one Mongol leader, and William is like, so basically you're going to suffer eternally in the flames of hell unless you repent and say you love Jesus right now. And the Mongol guy is like, that's incredibly, if he's like, the Mongol guy is like, actually, in my culture, it's really offensive to say that I'm evil and I'm going to suffer eternally.
You know what it's like? You know who he is?
Who?
He's one of those guys who stands on like, well, in Glasgow it's Buchanan Street.
Yeah.
Pick any major city has a street where these guys congregate.
Yep.
And just stands in front of a loudspeaker being like, Santa means Satan.
God means dog. No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's in London, it's Brixton. It's always Brixton.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of Brixton Station. Yeah, so actually, like, William's interpreters are trying to do him a favor, because they're not actually giving his words, like, they're not actually interpreting his words accurately to the Mongols all the time, because they're clearly trying to, like, shield both of them from danger.
It's like the Anjin in Shogun, where he'll be like, tell this man that I think that his sushi is disgusting and it gave me food poisoning. And what's her face?
Oh yeah.
Is like, the Anjin thanks you for your thoughtful fish dinner.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And yeah, unfortunately for the Mongols, like William says after a few months there, he starts like pick up on some Mongolian and begins to like realize that they're not translating his words right. And it clearly pisses him off. But, you know, I mean, again, this is a testament to like the Mongol level of tolerance that like the guy who he angers is not Munke Khan himself. It's some subsidiary Khan. And that Khan is like, you just go on to Karakoram, whatever, like, try your luck with the Great Khan. I don't know.
Presumably turns his back and sniggers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And impressively, William finds a quite cosmopolitan group of people at the court of the Great Khan in Karakoram. And around Karakoram.
I mean, he does call it a shithole.
He calls Karakoram a shithole, yeah. Well, he's like, he's having a bad time. And he won't embrace...
This is like when I went to Hamburg.
He does...
And I just decided that the entire nation of Germany had decided to victimize me.
No, basically.
Oh my god, this is what it was like. Oh.
Yeah. No, exactly.
All I will say about that trip is to the listeners, it's the stuff of legend in my life. Tell me how you would feel if at 1 a.m. a German man says to you, yeah, well, I think you might be fucked.
And that's like arguably a more polite of a reception than what William of Rubik is receiving from the Mongols.
Well, because I didn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't tell anybody that they were going to burn in hell.
Yeah. No, exactly. But yeah, he gets there, and again, he finds a fairly cosmopolitan court of people. So he has like some luck sort of trying to negotiate with some local Nestorian Christians who he meets. So this is the Eastern Church of Christianity that has become quite sort of detached from...
I should say, we use, and lots of people in medievalists use Nestorian as shorthand for the Church of the East. This is a little bit of a slander. They were never officially Nestorian in right, but that's what people called them.
Yeah. And
continue to call them. Because it's easier than saying, the Church of the East. No, not that one. No, not the other one.
Yep.
The Asian one.
And, you know, the Khan at first is, like, clearly somewhat amused by, like, this prospect. And he's very curious about, oh, what sort of place do you come from? What are you guys all about? And actually, they staged, like, a big sort of, like, 3 or 4-way debate between, like, William, a Muslim guy, like, a Tengrist guy, and maybe it's, like, a Jewish guy or something. And they're all arguing about, like, their different sort of notions of spirituality. But it all goes wrong for William because his translator is, like, gets really sick of trying to translate his arguments and basically just gives up. So William says... Then they asked me, as if in derision, where is God? To which I said, where is your soul? In the body, they said. I replied, is it not everywhere in your body? And does it not direct the whole of it, and nonetheless is it invisible? So God is everywhere, and governs all things, though invisible, for he is intelligence and wisdom. Then, just as I wanted to continue reasoning with them, my interpreter got tired and would no longer express my words, so he made me stop talking.
You know the saying, if you meet one asshole in your day, you've met an asshole. If everybody you've met in the day is an asshole, you're the asshole.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave that hanging in the air.
Yeah. No, it's not great.
That's the Belgians for you.
Yeah, and William clearly doesn't think that well of his interpreters. He clearly has some negative experiences with the Nestorian Christians, the Eastern Christians who are locals, because he tries to have some of them act as interpreters and they get drunk. And I think I talked about this in like the 2 episodes ago, but there's a scene where he's trying to talk to the Khan, and the Khan is drunk, and the interpreter is drunk, and they keep, like, both misinterpreting his words and being like, I can't believe you would say that to the Khan. And then there's all of these, like, cultural practices that they don't understand. So not William himself, but one of his traveling companions, another monk, steps on the threshold, like on the doorway of the Khan's yurt, which still to this day in Mongolian culture, it's considered extremely unlucky to step, like, on the threshold. So you have to step, like, when you go into a door, you have to step with your right foot first, and you have to step through the door, not, like, directly onto the door frame or the bottom of the door frame. But they don't do this. Or William's friend doesn't do this. And they're basically like, your friend can't go inside anymore.
He's a fucking idiot.
He messed up going through a door once, so he cannot be trusted with going through any more doors.
Well, he messed up going through perhaps the most important door in all of Mongolia.
It's a really big deal, yeah, that he does this. And he's, like, frankly quite lucky to have survived. So, yeah. It's not great, and they unsurprisingly get sent home having converted no Mongols.
and possibly accidentally converted some guys to Islam.
Yeah. No doubt. But he does, I think, probably for me, the most novel and interesting parts of his travelogue, and it's accepted that, like, everything he wrote basically was factual. Like, he was just a guy who was sort of in dire straits writing down, like, what was happening to him. But he writes about meeting other Europeans in Karakorum. So he meets a French woman who was living in Hungary when she was kidnapped by the Mongols, endured, unbelievable hardship, was brought to Karakorum eventually.
In case the last episode gave you the impression that these were sort of benevolent liberal internationalists.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, she basically has to go on, like, a death march, but she gets to Karakorum, and actually makes, like, a somewhat decent living for herself as a yurt frame builder with her husband. And there's another guy who...
Shit, I want that job.
I know. There's another guy, named Guillaume, who is a Parisian goldsmith who has also been abducted from Hungary by the Mongols, and who is quite esteemed and quite high status in their society at this point. Of course, none of these people are allowed to leave, but Guillaume has a young man who he has adopted. It's not clear whether this guy is a Mongol or European or what, but a young guy who is basically adopted as his son, and who is a very good interpreter, actually, and basically liaises between Guillaume and the Mongols, and the Mongols give him these sort of very elaborate commissions, and they send their own goldsmiths and silversmiths over to assist him with the help of this son, the interpreter. And so when William of Rubruck is there, Guillaume has been commissioned to create this elaborate silver fountain for the palace of the Khan, one that's shaped like a tree. And
was previously mentioned by a commenter in one of the last episodes.
Yes, exactly.
This is that tree.
This is. And it has 4 spouts in it that pour out. One pours out mare's milk, one pours out rice wine, one pours out honey mead, and the other pours out, I think, like ale or something. And
this is symbolic.
Yes.
Of the different nations that are ruled by the Mongol Empire.
Yes.
No prizes for guessing what the mare's milk is standing in for.
Yep. So, yeah, they do get, like, a little bit of help from this son, the interpreter, when Guillaume can spare him, but it's, like, kind of too little too late. And again, like, they basically get sent home. And there's a very dejected last page by William where he says, like, I don't know if this is a worthwhile endeavor, but, and this is the last thing he says, if you guys try to do this again, like, send someone with, like, 2 or 3 interpreters. Because, yeah, it's hard out there. And that is, like, there is really absolutely no sense of mythologizing or of, embellishing, because this is like a survival situation basically, and they are somewhat lucky to escape unscathed, because they've made somewhat fools of themselves out there. Let
Another network that European travelers could pull upon in Asia was actually Christianity, because again, as we've talked about before, the Church of the East exists. They are there. They are just kind of doing the same thing that they've done for almost 1,000 years at that point. And I'm going to pull the curtain back on this episode a little bit, because when I was researching this episode, I was like, okay, we've got plenty of stuff about, like, Europeans going to Asia. I want to talk about Asians going to Europe. And there truly is not a lot. One of the exceptions to that, at least in terms of written sources, one of the exceptions to that is the story of Rabban Bar Soma, who was a Nestorian Christian monk. He was a Uyghur who was born in modern-day Beijing, and according to his biography, he was raised in an Eastern Christian family and became a monk at the age of 20. So, many years later, he and his acolyte, Marcos, decided to go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So they set off in a baggage train. And we have a story of his journey that purportedly is a sort of adaptation of his diary into a narrative that gives us some interesting things about, first of all, about the process of traveling between China and Europe, but also I think says some interesting things about how Christians thought about their place in the world. So this is in the late it's important to note this is in the late 13th century. So like very much the Mongol Empire is in full. It's fully flourishing. It's fully established at this point. And yet his description of the description of Rabban and Marcos traveling through Asia is one of pretty extreme hardship. So there's one of the many anecdotes here is, they went to the country of Khotan, a toilsome and fatiguing journey of 2 months. The region was a bare and barren desert, and it was without inhabitants, because its waters were bitter, and no crops are sown there. And the whole journey there were only 8 days when, with the greatest difficulty, was sweet water found which the travelers could carry with them. So it's an inhospitable landscape, and but also conflict is a constant background. This is another thing about the Pax Mongolica, is that it is true that it was easier to travel between Europe and Asia, but also, you know who was fighting each other still?
Europeans and Asians?
Well, and also Mongols.
Yeah.
Mongols were fighting each other. So, Rabban's story goes, and in the days when they arrived at Khotan, it happened that a war was raging between the kings Kublai Khan and King Oko. And Oko had fled from him and entered this country and destroyed thousands of men therein. The caravan roads and ways had been cut, and grain was scarce and could not be found, and many died of hunger and perished through want. So again, it's not easy. Just the logistics alone of traveling from China to Europe are pretty brutal. I mean, again, they're not traveling with a group of 60 men. For most of the time, it's just the two of them. But like, it's still tough. And they also like the sort of the narrative that we get about the Pax Mongolica, that it's the super easy kind of super highway between China and Asia.
Yeah,
is undermined by this account, because they get to Georgia. And the story goes, they went towards Georgia so that they might travel by a clear or safe road. But when they arrived there, they found from the inhabitants of the country that the road was cut because of the murders and robberies which had taken place along it. So again, they're traveling kind of on that less reliable southern road that I mentioned. But this is still a reality check as to how we should sort of think about the Pax Mongolica. Like, bad shit still happened. And again, some people had better experiences than others, obviously. If you are just some pilgrims on the road, you're probably going to be a lot more vulnerable. But like, again, it's still an undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so they finally arrive in Persia, and they meet the patriarch of the Church of the East, the head of the Nestorian Church, who says to them, I know you wanted to do a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. I'm going to be real with you. There is a war happening. You shouldn't go to Jerusalem. Instead, you guys should actually just go straight back to China. To which I'm going to paraphrase. Actually, no, I'm going to read the whole thing. I am going to send the two of you each back to his own country. And those two monks said unto him, We have not come from that country in order to turn back and go again thither, and do not intend to endure a repetition of the hardship which we have already suffered. For the man who is tripped up twice by the same stone is a fool.
Yes!
So basically he's like, go
Get
back to China. He's like, absolutely fucking not. We are staying here. So Marcos and Rabban both stay in Persia, and Marcos eventually gets elected Patriarch of the Church of the East, and Rabban ends up serving as an ambassador for the Khan of the Ilkhanate. And he goes on later in life, so in his 60s, he goes on a diplomatic mission to many of the capitals of Europe on behalf of the Ilkhanate. And we have an excerpt of the letter which the Ilkhan had sent to the king of France, and I'm gonna. It starts out really normal,
Nice.
and then it has a good denouement. So basically, the Ilkhan was trying to find allies among the Christian Europeans because the Ilkhanate wanted to fight a war with the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, who were sort of their perpetual rivals in the Middle East. And so part of the letter to the King of France reads, If you send your warriors as promised and conquer Egypt, worshipping the sky, then I shall give you Jerusalem. If any of our warriors arrive later than arranged, all will be futile and no one will benefit. If you are care to, please give me your impressions, and I would be also very willing to accept any samples of French opulence that you care to burden your messengers with. So he's basically saying, we do need to have an alliance against Egypt. Also, if you're going to the shop,
Pick me up some Madeleines and a baguette and a nice bottle of Bordeaux.
Exactly. It's
More rosé.
huzzah!
Huzzah! That's really funny.
It's so good.
I love that.
But anyway, that's just an aside. Because I think the thing that's really interesting about the story of Rabban Bar Salma is it's not a story of a culture clash. He goes to Constantinople, he goes to Paris, he goes to England, he goes to Rome, and again, this is a guy who nominally represents a branch of Christianity that has been estranged from both the Orthodox and Catholic worlds for hundreds of years. And what's really striking about his story is that none of that really comes up. He rocks up to Constantinople and he's like, "This is sick, man. Can I see your relics?" And the emperor is like, "Sure." And most of the back end of the story is just him kind of communing with various relics and being very pious. And I think that that's a really interesting framing because it suggests that the story of Rabban Bar Salma, as it is transmitted to us by later Christian writers, is of a story of a united and globalized Christian community that encompasses, everyone from, Paris to Beijing. And that is not traditionally how we're used to thinking about Christianity in the late Middle Ages. And that is quite frustrating because I'm going to be honest with you, I went looking for a story about a Chinese person going to Europe and being like, damn, these white people crazy. And that doesn't really exist.
No.
Because Rabban doesn't, again, we don't have his direct writings, but the storyteller is not interested in cultural clashes. There are actually very, very few observations in the story about the culture of Europeans. They're like, the Franks are great at making war, and that's kind of it. He's not like, where are my chopsticks? What is happening?
Yeah, because, I think that there's a clear sort of lens that Europeans are developing over the course of the Middle Ages through which they view Asia and the East. And I think that it's not necessarily a reciprocal relationship not in that there's, not a perception from the East of Europe as foreign or different, but in that it's not becoming like codified in sort of a genre of literature. And one of the pieces of literature.
Yes. We're finally getting there.
Whoop, whoop. One of the pieces of literature that helps to sort of cement the status of, Asia as being this exotic, sort of fantastical, almost mythological land is a work by a Venetian boy. Well, not by a Venetian boy, a work recounting the story of a Venetian boy named Marco Polo.
Yes, the story of how we get the travels of Marco Polo is in and of itself amazing.
It's prison literature.
Yes. So Marco Polo has ended up through some through an entirely unrelated misadventure, has ended up imprisoned by this in a cell with this other guy who is like a writer of chivalric romances.
Yeah.
And he's like telling the story of his life. And this guy's like, damn, this would be a sick book, actually. And Marco Polo's like, I mostly want to talk about taxes.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. So yeah, this is one of the most famous pieces of Western literature of all time,
yes.
I would say. I mean, from the moment it's published until the present day, I would say that it has been widely known, and it's been a cultural benchmark for travel literature and for crafting and solidifying the image of the Western explorer.
It has been dramatized countless times.
Yes, Benedict Wong was Kublai Khan.
Okay, I want to talk about that very, very, very briefly.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, because we are the only two people who watched the Netflix Marco Polo
We're Netflix
show.
Marco Polo shooters,
yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
Listen.
It's a lot of fun.
Kutaloon is cool as hell.
Oh, do you also enjoy a woman who wears trousers and will throw you to the ground?
Yes.
Me too. And the best part of the show is Benedict Wong as Kublai Khan.
Yes.
The way that Benedict Wong as Kublai Khan pronounces the word Mongol is like, he makes such a meal out of it. He adds like 3 extra syllables. I can't even do an impression because I won't be able to do it justice.
No, I wouldn't even try.
Just go and watch, like, I mean, it's just like, that show is like 50% like Kublai Khan hype moments and aura.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody please make Benedict Wong Kublai Khan Sigma edits.
Oh my god, yeah.
I think the moment in his first introductory scene where he delivers the line, "My grandfather, Genghis Khan, descended from a wolf." And I was like, and we're in. The only issue with it... Oh, and the other thing is that the last fucking... Like, the very end of Season 2, after which the show was canceled, is teasing the arrival of Prester John.
Yes!
They were going to do Prester John.
Which is so cool and so inspired.
Prester John fights Marco Polo Prester John fights Kublai Khan is like... It is... borderline like jumping the shark into alternate history, but also...
What do you mean borderline? Borderline because the Prester John Wars of the 1280s were a highly disputed event.
But like, God,
borderline.
I'm not saying it's borderline a historical. I'm saying it's borderline jumping the shark.
And you're right. You were right. Dev Patel would have been Prester John.
Yes, Dev Patel would have been a fantastic Prester John. Lee, again, if I was taking up the mantle of showrunner, I'd be like, you know how they always say he's Indian? Just lean into that.
Yeah.
Just make him Indian.
Is he not Indian?
Well, India means something... No, Dev Patel is Indian.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Dev Patel. I was like, is Dev Patel not Indian?
Dev Patel Dev Patel literally just made a movie about killing Narendra Modi.
I was gonna say, yeah, Indian. I know he's a British man of subcontinental
of Indian
extraction,
descent, yeah.
But I was like, wait. But no, yeah, I get it. Prester John, yeah.
Prester John, just make Prester John's kingdom just India.
You really had me like spinning out there. I was like, am I racist? Is Dev Patel not Indian?
Is Dev Patel Hungarian?
Dev Patel is Sicilian, obviously.
Anyway, so Marco Polo
is born into a family of illustrious merchants. His father Niccolo and his uncle Maffeo are also Venetian merchants. And while young Marco is, just a wee infant rolling around on the floor of Venice, they are off on grand adventures. They go to Constantinople. They are sent by the Pope to the court of Kublai Khan. And Kublai Khan is like, I like these Venetian boys.
Bring me more.
Yes, so he actually sends Niccolo and Maffeo back to the Pope with like a golden tablet called a paisa that is basically just to like treat this person as if you would treat that, the way you would treat the Khan tablet. Allegedly, it's a golden tablet, a foot long and like 3 inches wide. So it's like a golden staff, a solid golden staff that says that everyone has to give you a horse for free and feed you and put you up and so on. So they're already like, they've clearly got a good rapport with the Khan. And they go back and there's some fuckery because like the Pope dies. It's all very complex. But basically, by the time they make it back to Venice, young Marco Polo is 17 and he's raring to go on some adventures. So they go back to the Levant and they talk to the Pope, and the Pope sends them off to the court of Kublai Khan again. So there was a lot.
Why is the Pope in the Levant?
Crusader states.
Oh, right. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
Yes.
Sorry, I just had to clarify that.
No, yeah, that's valid. And they get sent back off again as an emissary. And they go back, and the Khan likes the young Marco Polo so much, he does not let him leave. The Khan is like, I like this guy. I like this guy a lot.
He's now my prisoner. Huzzah!
Yes. Yes. Not the first fateful imprisonment that will happen, or no, not the last fateful imprisonment that will happen to the young Marco. And he's abroad, I think, overall for 21 years.
Yeah.
And I think he spent 17 of those in the service of the Khan, being sent as an emissary, occasionally, to other parts of the empire or even abroad. So he goes to, I think, Indonesia, India, Thailand. These are all modern day geographical descriptors, but what would be those countries now? And engages with all of these foreign cultures. And so we already have information in Marco Polo's account that he spoke 4 languages. We don't know what those languages were, but it's assumed, I believe, that it is Italian, Mongolian, Persian, and Turkish, possibly.
Those are the ones that make the most sense.
Yes.
Because if you remove any one of them, you start to get worried for him.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, and by all accounts, he's like an extremely bright young man. He is like very perceptive. He's very intelligent. And yeah, the Khan is just like, I want this boy. And and so he goes all around, and the Khan, when he comes back, the Khan asks him to describe all of these places that he's seen. And the Khan asks him to describe the cities in Europe and the places that he's passed through on his way.
And he's like, yes, and all of these cities, they have women's names.
Yes, and Italo Calvino made a great book about it called Invisible Cities.
Can I briefly read a very short excerpt from Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities?
Yes.
Sire, now I have told you about all the cities I know. There is still one of which you never speak. Marco Polo bowed his head. Venice, the Khan said. Marco smiled. What else do you believe I have been talking to you about? The Emperor did not turn a hair. And yet I have never heard you mention that name. And Polo said, every time I describe a city, I am saying something about Venice.
Ooh, it's a really good book.
It's
you
a very
guys.
good book. It's a very strange book. You kind of have to settle into it, but it's
Yeah.
excellent. Once you get what's going on, you're like, oh, this is actually sick.
Oh yeah, it's good.
There's a city called Olivia.
Yeah, it is. And Olivia's like a stinky city. It's like a real smelly one.
It's covered in soot.
I think isn't it the one that like looks really beautiful, but you realize after you spend a bit of time there, it's like really stinky.
I can't comment.
I think it is. Hey.
Anyway,
Anyways, let's be nice to Olivia now. She might be smelly, but she's doing her best. The city. So yeah. Yes. So apparently Marco asks the Khan several times if he can go back home. Several times the Khan refuses, and eventually in 1295, Marco Polo is allowed to return back to Venice. They have to take the Khan's daughter to Persia to marry some nobleman on the way back. That's like their last mission. They get there, they find out the nobleman is dead. They're like, what do we do? The Persians are like, he's got a son. They're like, okay, close enough. They drop her off. And then it is a few years later that this account was written, and it's a very long account. It's very detailed. It's of course not written by him, and some people think that Marco Polo never went to Asia at all.
yes, let's run down the evidence.
Yeah, so, boy.
On the one hand, you have a bunch of very specific, independently verified details about Chinese culture.
So even in the Middle Ages, actually, people were really skeptical of Marco Polo's accounts, but this was more because, like, he made the Mongols sound really cool. I mean, not only does he say a bunch of things like, oh, everyone in China is really polite.
Okay.
Which Europeans were like, this is so unrealistic, man.
They're barbarians, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. But he also, I mean, the whole account is just replete with these stories of like the excesses of the Khan's court. And one of them that I found quite topically relevant and seasonal was the story of, or the account of their big February festival for the Lunar New Year.
Oh, yeah.
Which is called like the White Moon Festival because it was originally to celebrate like the milking of the animals. So, of the White Feast held on New Year's Day and the number of presents then brought. It is well ascertained that the Tatars date the commencement of their year from the month of February.
Remember that Tatar means Mongol.
Yes. And on that occasion, it is customary for the Great Khan, as well as all who are subject to him in their several countries, to clothe themselves in white garments, which, according to their ideas, are the emblem of good fortune. This is done in the hope that during the whole course of the year, nothing but what is fortunate may happen to them, and they may enjoy pleasure and comfort. Upon this day, the inhabitants of all the provinces and kingdoms who hold lands or rights of jurisdiction under the Great Khan send him valuable presents of gold, silver, and precious stones, together with many pieces of white cloth, which they add, with the intent that His Majesty may experience throughout the year uninterrupted enjoyment, and possess treasures adequate to all his expenses. With the same view, the nobles, princes, and all ranks of the community make reciprocal presents at their respective houses of white articles, embracing each other with demonstrations of joy and festivity, and saying, may good fortune attend you throughout the coming year, and may everything you undertake succeed your wish. On this occasion, great numbers of beautiful white horses are presented to the Great Khan, or if not perfectly white, it is at least the prevailing color.
You can sprinkle a few in there.
In this country, white horses are not uncommon. It is moreover their custom, in making presents to the Great Khan, for those who have it in their power to furnish 9 times 9 the article of which the present consists. Thus, for instance, if a province sends a present of horses, there are 9 times 9, or 81 head in the drove, and so of gold, or of cloth, 9 times 9 pieces. His Majesty receives at this festival no fewer than 100,000 horses. On this day, it is that all his elephants, amounting to 5,000, are exhibited in procession, covered with housings of cloth, fancifully and richly worked with gold and silk, and figures of birds and beasts. Each of these supports upon his shoulders 2 coffers filled with vessels of plate and other apparatus for use of court. Then follows a train of camels, in like manner laden with various necessary articles of furniture. When the whole are properly arranged, they pass in review before his majesty and form a pleasing spectacle.
I'm sure they do. I would be pleased by that.
So, you could see where maybe a lot of embellishment would come into, or a bit of embellishment would come into this. I mean, 100,000 horses.
I'm questioning the 5,000 elephants.
Yeah, 5,000 elephants is a lot.
And also 5,000 elephants in one place. 100,000 horses, it's like, I can imagine it being a slip that says, we tried to deliver 500 horses. We will try again soon. But like 5,000 elephants in one field, that's a lot of mud.
Yeah, and it was a bit of a medieval convention to like represent big numbers. It's just like, like how they say, there was 100,000 or like 1 million ships at the Battle of Hastings.
Exactly.
But it is otherwise, like, quite detailed and quite specific and does correspond fairly well, now that we know, with the historical record of how this was celebrated. And it is also a festival that is still celebrated in Mongolia and Central Asia today. So, White Moon, yeah. However, in the 20th century, discussion and criticism of the veracity of this account turned more to not things that were included, but things that were omitted, or mistakes that people perceived Marco Polo, or the guy who wrote his book down, Rustichello de Pisa, to have made while writing it down.
So the big one that a lot of people cite is there's no reference to the Great Wall of China.
Yes, which is a stupid thing to pick out, because when was the Great Wall of China built?
I actually don't know.
I believe it was the 11th or maybe even 10th
Yeah,
century?
it was old. And also, here's the important point. You know what the Great Wall of China was meant to do? It was meant to keep out northern invaders. The northern invaders are here.
Yes.
The northern invaders are his hosts.
Yes.
They are running China. They don't give a fuck about the Great Wall.
So it was actually, the Great Wall was in ruins
Yeah.
At the time of Marco's visit. Actually, the way that we know it in its current form, the present structure was built, I believe, in the 16th century, so long after Marco would be there. And actually, even though he doesn't mention it, the later traveler, Ibn Battuta, did specifically, when he was in China, ask people, what about the Great Wall? Chinese people. He asked Chinese people, and they all said, what are you talking about? I don't know what that is.
You mean the pile of rocks 500 miles to the north that
Yeah.
I've never thought about?
Exactly. But anyways, this criticism all came to a head in 1995 when the historian Frances Wood published her takedown of Marco Polo in the form of a book titled, Did Marco Polo Go to China?
Yes.
Can you guess what her answer is?
No.
That's
right. Like, what was her explanation for the things he got right, then?
So I actually read a fair bit of the book because it's extremely light reading. She doesn't really explain. I mean, so her explanation is that it was all cobbled together from accounts that Marco heard from people around the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. And he never went there, but he did travel around the Black Sea and the Mediterranean and just like decided to do like an oral history project where he fabricated a story.
But also the things that are here's my very simple counter argument to this widely debunked argument, so it's kind of redundant, but the things that we definitively know from that book are hearsay and that are presented as hearsay in the book are wronger in a completely different way and in a significant like order of magnitude compared to the stuff about China that just happens not to get mentioned.
Well, yeah.
Compare the account of the assassins that we've talked about 2 episodes ago with the treatment of China, where it's just like, yeah, this old guy's a fraud, they're all insane, and they're full of hot babes.
And he also says, some people told me about this.
Yes.
He never says, I saw this.
Yes, that's the other thing, is that the stuff that is hearsay is signposted as such.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's in the interest of the guy who's writing this down, who is a romance author, to embellish it a little bit. So we don't know. We'll have no idea ever what was added by Rustichello and what was Marco's own words. But even the account we have in its current form comes to us pretty believable. So it's a very strange book. So
people are also weird about foot binding. that he doesn't bring out foot binding, as though every woman in Chinese history forever has always has bound feet.
And also, I'm sorry, but, like, he goes to the Mongol court, and, like, it's an inability for people to perceive, like, Mongol and, like, Eastern Chinese cultures as being distinct.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak Chinese. Like, he is not living in, like, the Chinese-speaking part of what is now China.
Yeah.
He is not, like...
He is experiencing...
interacting with Han Chinese people.
Well, he is experiencing Han Chinese culture through a Mongol lens.
Yes.
I think that you can definitively say. All of his intermediaries are Mongols or Persians or whoever. Like,
yes.
He's not... like, the fact that he doesn't speak Chinese is huge.
Yes, I mean, obviously it shapes his experience, but yeah, then maybe it makes sense that, like, he talks more about fermented mare's milk and doesn't mention tea. Like...
Well, because, again, the Mongols are the people who are in charge.
Yes. So anyways, other criticisms she makes of Marco Polo include that his story is not written in the first person. It wasn't written by him. She says it's not structured like a conventional travel log. I mean, it's not.
They hadn't invented that yet.
Well, you know, he's a merchant, and it is structured like a merchant's sort of guidebook.
Yes, because we talked about this very briefly in the last episode, but most of the things that he is preoccupied by are not, and then voluptuous ladies fell upon me, and I was powerless to resist. It's, here are some facts about salt production.
Yeah, I'll get to that. So, yes, and she also talks about how he inaccurately renders, like, Chinese and Mongol place names, which, again, this is all being written down by an Italian guy who's never been to China or Mongolia. So it makes sense that he would write down the names weirdly. And also, it's not really an unexpected thing for someone to localize names.
Yeah, that was the convention, even when Europeans were talking about other places in Europe!
Yes, I mean, the book is really bizarre. She has a whole chapter about how Marco Polo did not introduce ice cream, noodles, or dumplings to Europe.
Fair enough, but...
No, it's not fair enough, because that has nothing to do with the book.
Yeah.
Marco Polo never says, and then I had ice cream, which I decided I would introduce to Europe. Like, she clearly has a bone to pick with travel writing, but I feel like the bone to pick should not be these people didn't go there. I mean...
It's that most travel writing is bad.
Well, she compares Marco Polo, for instance, she compares his descriptions of food to the descriptions of food by British travelers to China in the 18th and 19th centuries. And says they're
people with an entirely different frame of reference.
Well, she says Marco Polo's descriptions are not very detailed, just like the colonizers who went in the 18th and 19th centuries.
And there it is.
But it's like, why are you comparing him to people who actually went there?
And also...
Even if your criticism is... he has bad intentions. Why are you saying that he is like the people that went there
and
with
also,
bad intentions?
he's not a colonizer. He asked the Khan to leave, and the Khan was like, no, you work for me now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is another important thing, is that I compared at the end of the last episode, I sort of linked the globalization of the Mongol Empire, that the Mongol Empire sort of oversaw, with the globalization that happens a few hundred years later in the European age of quote-unquote discovery. And the fundamental difference here is that, A, the entire system is being overseen by Asian people. So write that down. This is not a European colonial project.
No.
There's a reason why I very deliberately called Europe and Persia and China the periphery of the Mongol world, because they were. Marco Polo is a guy who went to China with an angle and got wrapped up in forces he couldn't really control.
Yes, so it's weird because in general, like, this book complains that he's, like, not being nuanced enough in some ways, but then, like, she also criticizes him for, like, not being enough of a stereotypical medieval travelogue. So, for instance, she says... Unfortunately, those who read the description of the world, which was the original title of Marco Polo's accounts, will discover that much of the account of the East does consist of tons of salt and distances. Though these descriptions are sometimes intermingled with stories about caliphs and magi, they are fundamentally practical, and even without following a logical itinerary, the book serves more as a merchant's view of the world than that of a creative writer.
You know what that sounds like?
How is that
somebody who went to the fucking country?
It's supposed to rebuke the idea that he was there. And so, I mean,
this book reads more like somebody who is interested in being relevant and useful than somebody who's making shit up.
Yeah, and so basically, I mean, this book that she published was really controversial right from the get-go. And actually, in 2012, a German researcher named Hans Ulrich Vogel published a paper basically saying, okay, let's hash this out. And what he did was he looked at Marco Polo's descriptions of the economics of salt production, taxation, and distribution, and basically came and verified it against contemporary Mongol and Chinese sources, and basically came to the conclusion there was no way that someone who didn't go to China could know this much about Chinese salt production and taxation. So here's what Marco has to say. The money or currency they make is thus prepared. The gold is formed into small rods and passes according to its weight without any stamp. This is their greater money. The smaller is of the following description. In this country there are salt springs from which they manufacture salt by boiling it in small pans. When the water has boiled for an hour, it becomes a kind of paste, which is formed into cakes of the value of 2d each. These, which are flat on the lower and convex on the upper side, are placed upon hot tiles near a fire in order to dry and harden. On this latter species of money, the stamp of the Great Khan is impressed, and it cannot be prepared by any other than his own officers. 80 of the cakes, in proportion as they find the natives less civilized, are carried by the traders among the inhabitants of the mountains and other parts little frequented. They obtain a sagio gold for 60, 50, or even 40 of the salt cakes in proportion as they find the natives less civilized, further removed from the towns, and more accustomed to remain on the same spot. So
you know what that is?
That's one of the descriptions of local salt. Would you like to hear several more descriptions of local salt production?
Well, though, what I was about to say is, you know what's striking about that account?
Yeah.
It's quite boring.
It's not the work of someone who is like, let me
weave a compelling narrative.
Yeah. And believe me, there are things that sound, slightly lurid, and not everything in here is verifiable, but this is very clearly someone who is focusing on what was interesting to them because he's a merchant. So he talks about taxation, he talks about salt, he talks about the specific way that Indian merchants build the bulkheads in their vessels in 13 watertight compartments using a certain number of planks. It's not the work of someone who is like, oh, I need something really entertaining to put down.
I think we both feel the same way about Marco Polo, which is that we have a deep affection for him.
Yeah.
I think if you compare him to William of Roebuck, who is just clearly having a terrible time and not engaging with the culture at all, if you put that up against Marco Polo and you look and you think about them being as kind of similar guys in a similar time period, you can kind of infer that he's having a good time.
Yeah. No,
he's
exactly.
interested, he's observant, he cares about nerd shit.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, it's just the evidence. I mean, this book is so long and so detailed, and the idea that someone would make all of this up is unlikely, and the idea that someone could find out this degree of specificity of information without actually spending time in China amongst the Mongols has basically been judged as completely unrealistic.
And also
so detailed.
Even if you had access to that information, why would you write it?
Yeah.
What would the possible point be?
Yeah. And I think yes, there are some things that are sensationalized, but I think it is the combination or maybe the tension of these two forces of this is very clearly at its heart a work by someone who is deeply interested in and embedded in this culture. And then there's maybe the layer of romanticization that was added on by Rustichello, and maybe a layer of sort of fantastic elements or slightly exaggerated elements, although there is nothing really that drastic. There's no monsters.
There's no dogmen.
There's no dogmen. But I think maybe it is the slight tension between these two forces and the fact that it is kind of on the cusp of an era, the era of the great unknown versus the era of exploration, that makes it so compelling, made it compelling at the time and makes it compelling now.
And I also think that I think that people also look at Marco Polo, when they look at Marco Polo, are sort of back projecting the Christopher Columbuses, the Vasco da Gamas of a later era, and just struggling to understand the idea that a European Christian could go to Asia with pretty benign intentions, have an excellent time, and then eventually leave.
Well, yeah, because Frances Wood published her book in 1995, and that was in sort of at the start of the wave of like Columbus sort of trutherism.
Oh yeah, no, decolonial historiography is very much in full swing at that point.
Yeah,
and there are much more, and I should say, in defense of decolonial historiography, there are much smarter ways of doing that.
That's the thing.
You do not need to tear down Marco Polo. Christopher Columbus is already a fucking lunatic.
Well,
he speaks for himself.
Exactly. No offense to the author of this book, but I feel like she wanted to make a point about, like, decolonizing travel writing, but, like, it was already old hat at this point,
yes.
So she needed to take it in, like, a more extreme direction. But
well, you gotta kill the sacred cow of the guy who invented the entire genre.
Yeah, basically.
Never in danger, wail our fathers, free and undaunted, exalt our renown.
So another writer who is writing at traveling around a similar area at a kind of similar time is the Arabic writer Ibn Battuta, who was another travel writer who, like Marco Polo, was very interested in the details and getting things right. Yeah, so Ibn Battuta was a Maghrebi traveler. He was born in Tangier, what's now Morocco, and he wrote a book called A Gift to Those Who Contemplate the Wonders of Cities and the Marvels of Traveling, which... That is the
That's
most...
me! I'm that person!
Well, I was going to say, that is the most Italo Calvino-ass title for a book I can possibly imagine. But, like... So he grew up as sort of in a noble Berber Muslim family, and in 1325 he set out to what are you laughing at the word Berber?
Noble Berber is just like it has echoes of in 30 Rock when they do the rural jerks.
Yeah.
The noble Berber.
The noble Berber. Anyway, so in 1325 this noble Berber sets out to complete the Hajj, the holy pilgrimage to Mecca that Muslims are expected to at least try and go on at least once in their lives. And his description of setting out on this journey is very moving, actually. He says, I set out alone, having neither fellow traveler in whose companionship I might find cheer, nor caravan whose part I might join, but swayed by an overmastering impulse within me, and a desire long cherished in my bosom to visit these illustrious sanctuaries. So I braced my resolution to quit my dear ones, female and male, and forsook my home as birds forsake their nests. My parents being yet in the bonds of life, it weighed sorely upon me to part from them, and both they and I were afflicted with sorrow at this separation. So he sets off for the Hajj, which takes less than a year to complete at this point. He does not return for over 20 years. And he ends up traveling, I mean, pretty much everywhere.
He just kind of vibes it out. He's not like... He's not being held hostage.
No.
He just decides he likes to travel.
He's not on a mission. He goes to China, he goes to India, he goes all the way down the coast of Africa to Tanzania. He goes to Constantinople, and he goes to Spain, and he has these fascinating accounts of all these different societies, many of whom, by the way, we have otherwise quite piss-poor records for, especially the African ones. So one of the many hats that he wears is that he gets employed as a religious judge for Muhammad bin Tughlaq, the Sultan of Delhi, and also, interestingly, he also describes the Indian Postal Service in pretty much the same way that we talked about the Mongol Post Service, where you have the horse post and the running post. And that's like one of the first things that he writes about, because he's genuinely interested in the minutiae of life. He also records like lots of everyday details, like people's meals. So he talks about when he's living in Delhi. He talks about how royal feasts begin with round breads, which chapatis,
Yep.
followed by roast meat, sambusak, which is probably means samosas, and chicken served on a bed of rice. Finally, followed by dessert like halva and almond pudding.
Oh,
I know. I want to get on a train right now to Brick Lane, for real. It's nice to know that Indian food has always been sick.
oh, of course it has been.
He was also, he was overawed by Delhi. He called it the metropolis of India, a vast and magnificent city, uniting beauty with strength. It is surrounded by a wall that has no equal in the world, and it is the largest in India, nay, rather the largest city in the entire Muslim Orient. He was also less fond of the Sultan, who, to be fair to him, is described in historiography as the Mad Sultan.
Nice.
So his description is, the Sultan was far too free in shedding blood. He used to punish small faults and great without respect of persons, whether men of learning or piety or noble descent. Every day there are brought to the audience hall hundreds of people, chained, pinioned, and fettered, and are executed, tortured, or beaten.
Whoa,
I know.
that's not cool.
Well, he's like, this is not the way that Muslims should conduct themselves.
I
Thank
don't
you very
endorse
much.
that.
So, after going to India, he travels down the east coast of Africa. He goes to Mogadishu in Somalia,
Nice.
and he's thoroughly impressed with Mogadishu. He calls it a town of endless size. Its people have many camels, of which they slaughter hundreds every day, and they have many sheep. Its people are powerful merchants. In it are manufactured the clothes named after it, which have no rival, and are transported as far as Egypt and elsewhere.
Nice.
Another thing that he picks up on, and some people have questioned whether or not this is a class thing, but he does pick up on it, that Somali people love to eat.
In my culture, we value
Food and family.
Unlike your culture that starves and hates.
One of the people of Mogadishu habitually eats as much as a group of us would. We stayed 3 days, and food was brought to us thrice a day, for that is their custom.
There you go.
So, he also heads south, much further south than even in the genre of travel writing. He goes way off of the beaten track. He goes all the way down the coast of East Africa to the city-states of modern-day Tanzania, which are, and this is invaluable stuff because there are like no fucking external sources about the history of Tanzania. This is incredible.
It's amazing.
So he goes to various cities across Tanzania. He is most impressed by Kilwa Kisiwani, it's an island city on the coast. It's maybe the richest city in all of Eastern Africa because it controls the trade of Zimbabwean gold and elephant ivory, both of which you may be surprised to learn are quite valuable commodities.
Whoa.
He describes it as amongst the most beautiful of cities and the most elegantly built. And remember, this guy has gone to basically every single major city in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, in China, and in Africa.
Nice.
And he was like, nah, actually, Kilwa is sick. This is great.
Nice.
There's a great anecdote as well about the Sultan of Kilwa. So basically, the story goes: one day, a poor man approaches the Sultan after Friday prayers and requests that he turns over his royal garments to him. And the Sultan then goes into a house next to the mosque, followed by his royal entourage. He changes into a new set of clothes and hands his clothes to this poor man. Later, the Sultan's son comes back and says, "Hey, can we actually get those back, though?" And gives him, as compensation, 10 slaves.
Whoa.
I know.
Let's go.
And when the news reaches the Sultan, that the people are like, "Well done, Sultan. That was bang up job that you did there." He then orders that the man is given 10 more slaves.
Wow.
And also 2 loads of ivory.
Slave party. Yay.
So he doesn't really follow an itinerary. He goes and does lots of different things for lots of different people. He also, like I said, he also goes to Europe a little bit. He doesn't go to the sort of Latin Christian West, but he does go to Constantinople. He goes to Muslim Spain. Again, seemingly out of the love of traveling.
Yeah.
But there is a sort of quite a sad ending to his story, which is that while he is out traveling, the Black Death starts really running rampant through the Middle East and Europe. And when he returns on his road back to Tangier, he takes a detour to Sardinia, one last kind of like trip to see the sights, and then he returns back home to Tangier, and he finds that his own mother had died just a few months previously. So there is a tragedy to his story, but also he's just a cool guy. And also, I think what's interesting about him is note that he mostly, aside from going to China and going to Constantinople, he is mostly staying within the confines of the sort of greater Muslim world.
Yeah.
Whether that is northern India or that is Mogadishu. Those are all Muslim countries.
Yeah, but it's very helpful to him that there is this greater Islamosphere, for lack of a better word. Actually, there probably is a better word, but I don't know it. That facilitates
it's only early Muslims have come up with a word for the global Islamic community.
The Ummah.
Yes.
But
well done. You remembered the previous episode.
I mean the geography as well, you know. But also, like, the cultural state of being able to communicate in Arabic quite widely enables him to still have different cultural experiences, because there's still a diversity of cultures despite, relative religious and linguistic similarities. So it's pretty cool. And, in the Middle Ages, it would have been really, we've talked so far about people who have had all these sort of inroads into these different cultural experiences that they had when they were traveling, be it religious or, you were sent on a mission by the Pope as an emissary, and without any kind of pretext or justification for traveling, and without any kind of intermediary between you and this foreign world, it would have been really, really difficult to just immerse yourself in a foreign culture. But what if you did anyways?
Yeah.
Okay, last.
One man who through sheer force of will and just three pure white boy swag made it work.
It just so happens when you have an interest in history that once or twice a year you find a new scrungly.
A new glupshitto.
A new glupshitto. This is my newest glupshitto. He is Burgundian, and his name is Bertrand de la Brocquiere. He is my quirk chungus. He is my sun, my moon, and my stars.
Hey, post a comment in the episode description about who is your weird medieval guy's glupshitto.
Yeah, please.
One-off characters who you still think about.
Right. So this is a Burgundian man who goes to the Holy Land, presumably on pilgrimage, ostensibly on pilgrimage in the 15th century. Now, we now believe that he had a real reason for going, which was as a spy, sent by the Duke of Burgundy to get a sense for the Mamluk military capacities and what the Europeans could expect if they staged another crusade, which, as we know now, will never happen. It will never come to fruition. Bertrand Donne sails from Venice to Jaffa in, again, this kind of conventional tour guide, cruise tour way.
You might want to clarify that Jaffa's not Kaffa.
Jaffa's not Kaffa, this is true. Jaffa is Jaffa in Palestine. Kaffa is Kaffa in Crimea. Woo, geopolitics. Okay, cut that out. However, so the reason why we think that Bertrand de la Brocquiere was a spy was because he wrote down his experiences in great detail. Not his experiences of sailing from Venice to Jaffa, didn't say anything really about that, but wrote a lot about what happened once he got to Palestine, to the Holy Land, Jerusalem, and Gaza, and then suddenly decides to do something which was basically classified as insane by the people who he was with. So he's with some Burgundians. They get there, and he says, all right, guys, I know that this is controlled by the Mamluks, who don't really like Christians, don't like Europeans, but I think I'm just going to cut loose and, like, walk around on my own. And they're like, you're bonkers. And you know what? Like, he does not get off to a great start. But the story of how he walks home to Burgundy from Jerusalem is absolutely insane and is one of my favorite pieces of medieval literature. So first of all, he gets grievously ill. And he's still with some Burgundians at this time. And they dump him with some Arabs who they meet.
Typical fucking Belgians.
And
at it again.
The Arabs, no, they're Burgundians.
Same thing.
They're French. And so he gets dragged, like, back to Gaza, even though he's trying to go north. And he describes, like, thinking, oh, these guys could just, like, beat me up and take all my stuff. Because he's got, like, camels with, like, all of his money and stuff. And, like, but what happens, what he describes is these 5 or 6 Arab Muslim guys crowding around him and giving him a massage so good he passes out for, like, a day. Which is already, he's off to such a good start. I mean, on day 1 of this, like, solo excursion, he's having experiences that no white boy has had.
Died. And being brought back to life by the power of just, like, 6 Palestinian men giving him the world's greatest massage.
Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah. And he has a good time with them, recuperating. Starts to head north through modern day Lebanon and Syria, having a good time. So he gets to Damascus, stops in with some Christians in Beirut. So again, there's a lot of Christians, and the Christians are kind of the next jumping off point for the next stage of his journey. Stops with some Christians in Damascus.
But these are local Christians.
These are Middle Eastern Christians. These are local Middle Eastern Christians in Damascus. But they speak Italian, and they talk to him, and he asks them for a translation of the Quran. And he starts asking them about, like, Islam, and asks them for, he doesn't make it out like it's a full translation, but actually the Quran is quite short, isn't it, compared to the Bible? So I think it is, like, mostly there. So yeah, gets a Quran off them, in, I think, either Latin or French.
Again, off the Christians. It's already awesome.
Yes. I mean, yeah, because, he describes, well, they're all living there together, and, the Christians have connections in the Muslim world. So the next thing he asks the Christians is, well, how am I going to get back home? I need to walk home, guys. I need to walk home. What am I going to do? I need to walk all the way home. And they set him up with a, like, traveling group of Turks, including this Turkish nobleman, and they're all on their way back from the Hajj. And they basically take Bertrand Don to this Turkish nobleman, and the nobleman says, well, what can this white boy do? Can he speak Turkish? Can he speak Arabic? Like, and they're like, no. And Bertrand Don is just there, like, hey.
I have never in my life felt a deeper sense of kinship with anybody in the past. What can this white boy do? Nothing. Yep. Can he speak any languages? No. Is he very enthusiastic to be here? Yes.
So the Turkish nobleman, for whatever reason, says, fine, he can come, but only if he disguises himself as a Muslim slave. And so Bertrand Don describes, very reluctantly, presumably, having to go to the market and buy, like, a turban and some robes and, like, a curved dagger and a sword and a belt. And being like, well, yep, I got swagged out. And joining this, like, caravan of Turks. Now, he still doesn't speak any Turkish languages. He doesn't speak, he uses the word Tatar. I think, like, again, there's probably a degree of mutual intelligibility between, like, what would become Turkish, what would become sort of modern Tatar, etc.
But Tatar, again, is just a shorthand for we don't really know what these guys are doing.
Exactly, yeah. And then his next job that he needs to do is learn the language. So he describes sort of a chance encounter with in Damascus with a Jew from Kaffa, so Kaffa in Crimea. So presumably, so he says a Jewish man who can speak Italian and Tatar, which is extremely understandable because, as we spoke about in the last episode, Kaffa would have been the place where people would speak Italian and Tatar. So pretty cool link up. Here's what he says. God, who had protected me in the accomplishment of this journey, brought me acquainted with a Jew of Kaffa who spoke the Tatar and Italian languages. And I requested him to assist me in putting down the names of everything I might have occasion to want for myself and my horse while on the road. On our arrival, the first day's journey at Baalbek, I drew out my paper to ask, to know how to ask for barley and chopped straw, which I wanted to give to my horse. 10 or 12 Turks near me, observing my action, burst into laughter, and, coming near me to examine my paper, seemed as much surprised at our writing as we are with theirs.
Again, these are just 12 Turkish people laughing at you. You're just describing things that have happened to me.
They took a liking to me and made every effort to teach me to speak Turkish. They were never weary of making me often repeat the same thing and pronounced it so many different ways that I could not fail to retain it. So when we separated, I knew how to call. I knew how to call for I knew how to call for everything necessary for myself and horse.
Ekmek.
Yup.
Merhaba.
Domaras.
Yes. That's important.
Yep. So, yeah, and this is, like, again, really the kicking off point, because after this, he is just having the time of his life.
Nasıl sinus.
So he talks about, like, he talks about how they make pita bread. He talks about eating pita bread. He talks about a bunch of his Turkish traveling companions, like, cornering him and making him buy them a bunch of wine, and then they sit in a circle and all take turns like passing the bottle of wine around.
Things that have happened to me.
And he describes how he's like trying to leave, and they're like, it's actually extremely rude to leave the Turkish wine circle, and they're clearly just trying to keep him from like snitching. And then the like nobleman who has sponsored him shows up, and they all like scatter, and he's like super drunk, and the Turkish nobleman who doesn't know this is like, oh, come have dinner with me, we've just roasted goose. So he describes like having to sit super drunk at this table and pretend he's really sober, which is really funny. So he talks about all of the food. Just has this amazing time, and he talks, I think, quite sweetly and quite beautifully about several times when people show up and are like, is that a white boy, can we kill him? What that white boy doing? But you get a real sense for how well Bertrandon has like ingratiated himself into the world and the culture and the group that he is with. Because each time the Turks who he is with are like, no. He's with us. So
this is our white boy.
Here's another quote. He says, there we were joined by 2 Turkomans of Satalia, returning from Mecca, who supped with us. These men, seeing me well clothed and well mounted, having a handsome sword and well-furnished tarquet, you can hear him being like, these men who saw that a white boy was wearing luxurious robes and had a spectacular sword.
It literally is white boy shocks waiter by ordering in fluent Chinese.
Proposed to the Mamluk, as he afterwards owned when we separated, to make away with me, considering that I was but a Christian and unworthy of being in their company. He answered that since I had eaten bread and salt with them, it would be a great crime, that it was forbidden by their law, and that, after all, God had created the Christians as well as the Saracens. So, yeah, again, really cool guy, if you ask me. Really beautiful story, and he it's really interesting because he does... And I mean, by the end of it, you do really get a sense for the fact that he is, like, in a sense, gone native, not in a disparaging way. But
he rocks up to Burgundy being like, you've met me at a very Turkish time in my life.
Well, yeah, and then there's a quote about Turkish culture. So he's also passing through other areas and coming into contact with Arabs and other peoples. And it makes him just think about how much he loves Turks and Turkey.
Oh my god.
So he says, the Turks bear well fatigue and a hard life. They are not incommoded, as I have witnessed, during the whole journey by sleeping on the ground like animals. They are of a gay, cheerful humor, and willingly sing songs of the heroic deeds of their ancestors. Anyone, therefore, who wishes to live with them must not be grave or melancholy, but always have a smiling countenance. They are also men of probity and charitable toward each other. I have often observed that should a poor person pass by when they are eating, they would invite him to partake of their meal, which is a thing we never do.
So this, first of all, I would say that this is entirely my experience of Turkish people.
Yeah.
They are exactly like this. They are fantastic. And also that it reminds me of an anecdote from the first time I visited Turkey. First night, me and my friend were there, who was another white boy who's like a bit too into being Turkish. We were at a very local cafe in Istanbul, and with a Turkish friend of mine, and the owner of the cafe came up to sort of make conversation, trying to find out what these white boys were doing, basically. And when he found out that we were from Scotland, he was like, in Turkish, he said, "Ah, yes, the Scots, they are like the Turks of the North, a fiery people."
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to be fine.
It's really beautiful. I don't know. I probably shouldn't read his, screed against the Greeks, but he really does not come out with good
Give us
opinions.
one sentence.
Okay. Actually, I don't think I have it saved, actually. But he basically, it's really funny because the last, one of the last bits of the narrative is him getting into Constantinople. He's already kind of left the Turks and the Mamluks behind, and he basically is on this boat being piloted by these Greeks, and they think that he is he's a Turk. And he says, and then he says, "Oh, by the way, will you let me out at Para?" Which is the Italian part of Constantinople. And then he gets off and sort of ties up his horse and stuff and goes into a building, and he gets out and they're trying to steal his horse. Having realized that he's he's a Western European, and he realizes that the true allegiance is between the Muslims and the Catholics.
Yes.
Who are both the natural enemies of the Christians. Again, it's all, and I showed you this when we were in Ely, right? The picture of him presenting the Quran.
Yes.
But
we were 3 ales deep at the ale festival in Ely.
Yes, and I was like, I have to show you guys the picture from the illuminated manuscript that Bertrandon de la Brocquiere made of his travels, of him presenting a Quran to the Duke of Burgundy, where Bertrandon...
Burgundy.
Burgundy.
You said Burgundy.
Where he is presenting a Quran to the Duke of Burgundy, and he's wearing a Turkish tunic and a floppy Turkish hat, and he has his scimitar belted at his waist, and he's wearing shoes with little curly tips, and he's swagged the hell out. And the Duke of Burgundy is wearing his suit of armor, and it's what's going on?
Yeah.
I don't want this, mate.
And so he just bends the Quran immediately.
Yeah, which is quite sad.
I really that read was quite confronting. I feel like I met me.
Yeah. You did. That's good. I know.
Oh, that's
I
tough.
posted the snippet about Turkish culture on Twitter, but I forgot you're not on Twitter anymore, so you haven't seen it. Yeah.
Because it's run by Nazis.
Yeah, but so that's Bertrandon de la Brocquiere. So I think, to me, there is a bit of an affinity between him and Marco Polo, in that I think that both of them are very much the exception that proves the rule, and that you see that there is this cosmopolitan nature in the Levant and in Asia during the Middle Ages that facilitates a certain type of travel, be it pilgrimage or just mercantilism, where there is a degree of mobility. And this is something, the people that are taking advantage of this, anyone who's able to go on pilgrimage from Europe to the Holy Land, and anyone who's a merchant who travels between Europe and Asia, is already a vanishingly small fraction of society, really. I mean, while all of these things are happening, the average person like still lives in their village on their farm,
Farming turnips.
with their cows, farming turnips. And of the people that partook of this more mobile lifestyle, you know, just the smallest fraction of them were able to really go off the beaten path in this way and integrate and engage with a truly foreign culture in a truly sort of authentic way. And I think there really is an element of, again, like, you know, cosmopolitanism in Asia, especially in Central Asia and the Near East at this time, that enables that. And I think that's, you know, you were talking about how it's a bit frustrating, like, not to have similar accounts from Muslims and Asians in Europe around the same time, but it's just a completely different society.
Yeah, it's a much more homogenous society, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the one Chinese person who we do have a sort of detailed written account of their travels in Europe is somebody who has a way into Europe via the church.
Yeah.
But I think that what the stories of was it Bertrand? Is that his name? Mm-hmm. Of Bertrand and of Marco Polo.
Bertrandon.
Say that again.
Bertrandon.
Bertrandon.
Mm-hmm.
The stories of what I think the stories of Bertrandon and Marco Polo show us is that Europe is a less sort of cosmopolitan society, but I don't think that there's anything inevitable about that. I think there is a sort of repressed, in many ways, desire to participate in that world, and I think that not just the fact that these people went to Asia. I think that is spoken to by the fact that not just the fact that these people went to Asia and did these things, but also the fact that the travel writing was such a fantastically popular genre in Europe. People wanted to learn about the outside world. They found it deeply, deeply fascinating. And the fact that Europe was in many ways more parochial, more inaccessible, did not really dampen that desire to understand yourself within a sort of global context.
Yeah. Especially with, you know, in maps, in medieval maps of the world, Jerusalem is in the center. Mm-hmm. You know, there was not a perception of being at the center of the world, theologically or sociologically. And so it was a part of understanding what is out there, you know, getting a sense for and appreciating and marveling at the, you know, unbelievable and seemingly fantastical things out there. And yes, sometimes it was quite exaggerated and embellished, but it really did reflect, I think, a sense of marvel that you only get from really not knowing, and from the truly foreign, not in that, you know, it's completely different, but in that it's, to a lot of people, completely unknown nature of the world beyond your front door.
You find yourself in a land hundreds, possibly thousands of miles from your home, and the innkeeper says, "We're going to serve you their local delicacy," and they bring you out a boat made of bread filled with cheese
with an egg
in the middle of it, and you're like, "This is the life."
Yes.
Let us then through ourselves where we are rolling on gentle Doran, we strike for a throne.
Well, that's just about going to do us for another episode of the Weird Medieval Guys podcast. And if you liked this episode, please remember to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you like to leave us a Spotify comment, and Olivia might read it out on the podcast.
Thanks to Nate, who said, episode on Georgia, please.
That was it. We did a thing about Khachapuri.
No!
That was the episode about Georgia.
No, we need to do more Georgia.
We should do more Georgia. This is an excuse for us to eat more Georgian food.
Yes!
We will do an episode about Georgia. Because I have spent too long thinking about England.
We also got a comment a few days ago from someone on the 4th Norman Conquest saying, "Did you just call us Crypto Dutch?" please end the insults already. I assume we were talking about Belgians.
Presumably.
But I don't remember. But
Presumably.
yeah, sorry about that, mate.
I will return to the thing that I always say about the Belgians. You know what you did.
All right, well.
You think that Samson and Gert can fucking redeem you. It's not gonna happen. That's right, I know what you people like. I know what you're about.
We love you guys. We'd love to stay here and talk about travel writing for even longer.
Let's record a third episode in a row in one day.
Yeah, but unfortunately the night is drawing in. We need to roll up all of the... we need to roll out all of our rugs in our yurt.
Yes.
I need to go feed the horses one more time. Yeah, I think I have some fermented mare's milk that's just about ready to drink. So we are going to wrap it up here. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Take it easy.
A Bosch.
Wait, hang on. Say the Mongol Bosch.
Mongol Bosch.
Khan Bosch.
Oh, yeah. Khan Bosch. Big Khan.
Omi, at the curler tie, we've got the fermented horse milk. We've got the yak meat. Let's have it.
Honor in Haika, who can refuse us? No Norman warrior would shun jeopardy.